welcome to our class. For anybody who doesn't know, this is Dr. Igo's Nursing 480 class, self-care and working with special populations. In this class, we got to talk about how working on ourselves with future nurses and learning how to relate to future populations that we may deal with, such as some unknown cultures that exist within our country that we will definitely have to come in contact with. The population we chose to focus on is the Amish population. I work at Nemours in Wilmington, Delaware, and we get a large number of Amish patients and their families that come in. So, and before working there, I'd only known that they live in Lancaster. Like, that's all I really knew about them. But since I had to work with them a lot, I've learned there's a lot of different customs and tradition that impede our traditional view of healthcare. So we wanted to enlighten everybody so they can become better professionals for it. So my name is Kate.
I'm Shannon.
I'm Kira.
I'm Jen.
And this is our presentation, Helping Amish. Okay.
So first we're going to start off with a little trivia game to get to know the Amish community.
See how much you guys already know and how much I got to tell you.
We'll get the answers at the very end. But please contribute. So number one, during which period in history did the Amish have their start?
Any takers? Reformation, industrial revolution?
Industrial?
Sure, go for it.
And we get the answers at the end. The Amish and the Mennonites are different names to the same group of people. True or false?
False.
False? Okay. What's the most basic reason why the Amish reject technology? Which one? A?
We're going to say Jacob.
Go for Jacob.
How many languages do most Amish people speak? 2, 5, 1, or 3? 2. What will you not see on a married Amish man? A beard, a plain dark colored suit, a plain black hat, a mustache.
A beard?
Will not see that.
They all have beard.
Are they some of them don't they just got the curl in the back?
That's Hasidic Jew.
Oh.
Black hat.
I just know it's not a beard.
What will a traditional Amish woman never wear?
A neon dress.
I think we all got that one right. The old order Amish are willing to ride in cars, but they don't drive them. True or false? True.
True.
Okay. The Amish do use some modern technology. True. Okay. When an Amish teenager turns a certain age, he or she is allowed to give up the Amish life and see what it is like in the outside world, at least temporarily.
This is called Rumspringa.
So what is the average age of the Amish teen that experiences this?
18.
16 or 18?
16.
16?
Okay.
Amish do not like to be photographed.
True.
Okay.
Let's see how you guys did.
Number
Sorry.
1 is
The
wrong.
Reformation.
So
Way to
Reformation.
go.
Reformation. Okay, 2. You got that right. So
The
false.
Bible.
I should know.
Number 3. The Bible tells them so. So we got that one wrong. 4. 3. So we were close.
So you
We're wrong.
English, Pennsylvania Dutch, and a specific German for just a church.
Yeah.
I was
So a
close.
mustache.
I
You
was
will never
close.
see on
Instead
a
of
married
Kind of
Amish
says beard,
man.
but they all got
I was
beards.
close.
You guys were right about the neon pink dress. Good job. You're right about this. The cars. Modern technology, true. So some of them use it. They use gas-powered lamps for light in their homes and barns. So 16. You guys were right.
I know, it's just like crazy.
True.
Yeah.
So yeah, 6 out of 10.
Me
Not
too.
too bad.
Oh, I thought it said 90.
By Widener standards.
Just
it's
said
not.
6 out of 10.
You scored 90 points, so.
But that's not a 90 out of 100. All right.
Okay, so now we go a little bit more.
Okay, so let's go into what the Amish entail. They descended from the Swiss Anabaptists, but they decided that they wanted to break away from the Baptist church because they did not believe in infant baptism. Because in their rationale, we're all children of God. Why do you need to put water on the baby's head to show that? So they broke off into different sectors. They actually migrated more towards Pennsylvania first, but they have since broken off into 20 different states. There's a little place in Dover and Delaware, but they're even all the way out to Colorado. The biggest places now are Ohio and, of course, Lancaster County. It's actually one of the fastest growing subgroups of United States culture. In the year 1900, there was only 5,000 Amish in the country, and in 2010, there was 230,000. So that's quite a jump in 100 years. They attribute it mostly to their high recidivism rate. We talked a little bit about the Rumspringa that they do, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But they give their children a chance to kind of explore and decide, is this the life that I want? And it clearly is working well in their favor. And also, they've got really high birth rates. Like, they'll have up to like 10 kids. So no wonder that population's booming. They live a simple life. They're a simple folk. They believe in absolute pacifism. They don't have material luxuries like technology, as we know. Their clothing is very plain. You'll see women typically have like dark colored dresses and a black or white covering over them, and then they'll always wear a bonnet of sorts. And they have a specific type of bonnet. I think it's called a capro, which they wear in church for prayer. You'll never see them wear bright colors because that's too flashy, that's too much pride. And you'll see, in like at times of funeral and mourning, they'll wear entirely black. Men, on the other hand, they wear also dark clothes. We kind of talked about the beard situation going on. They will be clean shaven until they're married, and then once they're married, they will grow out their beard as a sign of their commitment to their wife and their role as the head patriarch of their family. They don't wear mustaches because the Bible said that they cannot have any any likelihoods of humanity. So have a mustache would block the likelihood of your face, so they don't have a mustache. It's the same reason why if you look at the little Amish dolls, the Amish dolls don't have faces because that's a likelihood of a human. And it's why they don't like being photographed because it's a likelihood of their image. Okay, so they have super strong community ties. I can't tell you how many times an Amish family has rolled in with about 50 people, and they take up the entire floor. They believe in the value of community elders. They're the ones that call the shots. So we've had kids that don't have good prognoses. They will appeal to the elders. The elders will decide whether they will continue treatment or whether they will withdraw care. But it's mostly the dad that makes the day-to-day decisions. My dad's trying to call me dad, not now. So they will, like one time we had a patient, he came in and he was doing okay, he was getting better. He was about to be discharged from the ICU to the step down, and the dad said, you know what, I think we've got it from here, we're going home today. And they went home today. It's because that's what the dad decided. Every person in the family has their own role. The father, again, takes care of the household, he takes care of the business, he runs the farm, he may run a furniture stand. The mother takes care of the household. It is her duty, per the Bible, to support her husband, and that's why she does that. She may run like a small quilting business, but typically they are not in the forefront of business. Children attend public school or Amish patriarchal school until 8th grade. I think there was a legislation, it was like the United States versus Yoder, that said that they don't have to go to formal schooling after 8th grade. So after 8th grade, they go back home, they learn how to run a household and how to perform their familial duties, and then they go from there. When I say that these people have the strongest work ethic I know, they mean if they're healthy, they're working. If they're not working, then they're not healthy. Everything in life is related to their ability to work and please the Lord. So you'll see a lot of them. They'll come, like the parents will come in, they'll run the family, the moms will stay with the babies, the dad will go and make sure the farm is continuing on as normal. And that's just kind of the way that they live. So customs, we touched upon the Rumspringa. That's where the show Breaking Amish came from. These 16, 17, 18-year-olds are running out and about discovering the English lifestyle and seeing whether they like that, whether they want to go to that, because they have the opportunity then to leave the Amish, the old order. More often than not, they choose to come back because they're 16 years old. What are they going to do? Another custom that they have is the barn raising ceremony. Let's say that somebody's barn fell down. The entire community comes together and literally builds a barn in one day. They start at sunrise. The men will get the frame up by noon, the women will cook them this massive meal, they'll go back to work, and it'll be done by the end of the day. As I said earlier, they live in rural communities and they live farmer lifestyles, agrarian lifestyles. So you'll see them at farmers markets, they'll sell their goods. They kind of play onto that. They sell it up, especially in Lancaster. If you go up there, it's all Amish. But yeah, they make their wares. They make them all handmade. I will say this: their roles of technology, though, they will make exceptions for particular health conditions. If they have a child, in my experience, that needs, let's say, oxygen at home, they will make sure they have a generator at home that will be able to power all the medical equipment that they need. Because in their experience, this technology is helping them move closer to God, so then they will allow it. But if it was a technology like a cell phone, that's moving them away towards God, so they will not have it. So that's a little Amish in a nutshell.
Okay, next we're going to talk about religion. The Amish believe that the community is at the heart of their life and faith, and that's the way to salvation and to live as a loving community apart from the world. Individualism is avoided because, as Kate mentioned, they focus all around their community and they like to help one another. And they do have a Christian religion. The Amish are closest to the Anabaptists, so specifically it's Protestant Christians who believe in adult baptism, pacifism, and the separation of church and the state, because it's the importance of community to faith. They worship out of their home or in their barns. So the Amish worship in their houses, which are designed to allow a large people to gather together, and different households take turns to worship. And worship is for the old and the young, and it's not confined to a prayer period or a weekly hour of church attendance. It permits Amish life in a variety of forms. So sometimes it's a 3-hour preaching service that takes place every other Sunday morning and is followed by a shared meal. On Sunday evening, there may be a meeting for young people of several communities who gather in a house to sing hymns and talk and just praise the Lord. And communion services are held twice a year, so that surprised me. In worship in Amish life, whether for the old or young, is not confined to a prayer period or a weekly hour of church. It all depends on when they meet and when they can. The Amish believe putting God and community ahead of the individual, a life of goodness rather than a life of intellect. And life as a spiritual activity. And they're also called the Pennsylvania Dutch, or also some people just call them the plain people, because they live a very simple life. And the funeral culture is slightly different. It's a 2-hour funeral service. As Kate mentioned earlier, they all wear black, so as you can see in the bottom photo. And 3 days after the death of the person, they're buried. But once it happens, they're taken actually to the house, and everyone can come and visit them, kind of like Irish wake in a way. And they're buried 3 days because it takes the community to dig out the grave.
Okay, so we're going to talk about how everything that these ladies just discussed impacts healthcare when it comes to Amish patients. Because the Amish are a very close-knit community that kind of does their own thing, they don't handle healthcare and insurance like the rest of us. We all have insurances through our jobs. If you don't have it through your job, you get it through the state. They basically have something that they called an Amish healthcare fund, which basically it merges together 3 main things. Basically, the churches they go to collect something called alms, which are, to people like Christians that go to church, it's like tithe offerings that you get 10% of your annual income every time you go to church. So they save that for times of need. They have benefit auctions where they try to sell their goods to local, people outside the local area to get money. And then something interesting that I learned was that local hospitals in these Amish communities actually make discounts and preset prices for the Amish population. So that actually helps them as well. They steer away from commercial insurance and Medicaid because they feel that they need to hold accountability as part of their faith, being accountable for all things, including medical care expenses, Social Security. So they basically don't want any parts to do with anything like that, and they feel that they can handle things and take care of themselves. It's an honor to take care of themselves and their community. When it comes to illnesses, if the community members have like a minor illness, basically it starts with the deacons at the church that everyone goes to. Because they have a fund set aside of offerings, the deacon basically gets notified that family's in need. They go to the family's home, talks with the family, sees what their financial state is. If they feel at their discretion that they need the money, then they will release the money and the person can go to, the hospital, get whatever done, get the treatment. When it comes to major illnesses, that's when the community elders get involved. Basically, the deacon, again, is the one who would go to the elders and say, okay, this is the current circumstance, and they decide if it's going to be like God's will to benefit the patient by giving the money to let them get this care that could be, life or death, or if it's God's will to just let it all play out. Thank you. Just like every other part of their community, the men basically play not only a role, but they play the role. Women, as Kate said before, their role, according to the Bible, according to their beliefs, is to just be at home and do the womanly, wifely duties, motherly duties. And the men are the ones who basically are the church deacon elders. They're basically the ones who are the ones who say what's going to go down. Women really don't have a say or input, which kind of can really affect the overall health of the whole community, because they basically say if you are sick, you'll get treatment. They basically say if you're dying, well, maybe it's the Lord's will that you die, and they don't really do preventative care. They don't really do immunizations. If someone has like a common cold, they may not feel like it's a big necessity to spend the money on something like that. So it can really affect the outcome, and something I read in an article said that the men usually outlive the women in these communities. And like Kate said, the women have tons and tons of babies, but if they have an issue, GYN issue, if they have anything, they may not get the care because the elders, who are all men, are saying, well, we don't feel that's a necessity. And in the article that I read also stated that a lack of education really is a hindrance to their health care, because they don't understand clinical situations. You can try to tell them as the nurse, the doctor can try to explain it, but if someone's already preset in their head and they think they know and they really have no idea, like we all feel this way in nursing school. I'm sure we came in here thinking we knew this and that, and then we realized, wow, it's a lot more detail than that. But these people don't know, so a lot of people suffer, and most of them are usually women.
So some considerations that the nurses have to take into consideration. So Amish practice folk medicine and home remedies. It's called powwowing. They believe that they can heal by touch, moving around a sick person, a lot of prayer, more so than like medicine. They believe strongly that vitamins and health foods are significant in maintaining their health. This has to be really considered when they come into the hospital setting and they bring in the food from home, or like their herbal remedies that they do.
From goat's milk.
Yes, so they don't pasteurize their milk, so it's like just a container of bacteria, and they put it in the fridge that's at the hospital with everyone else's food. So you have to take that into consideration when they come. They believe that strenuous outdoor activities such as hauling manure, milking cows, doing shop work contribute to staying healthy. They tend to socialize and marry their own, so this puts them at very high risk, for instance, of genetic diseases.
Mm-hmm. Especially cardiovascular diseases,
Yes.
as I know very well.
Like that was already mentioned, if an ill family member needs to use electricity when being discharged home, they must get permission from the elders first. So if they do have to go home with oxygen, they have to get that generator, and it has to be approved before they can do that. Birth control measures are not practiced, so this results in very large families and the growth of the Amish population. there's an average of 6 children per family. They use a midwife for birth. They don't typically come to the hospital unless they need to. They usually, only time I've read in the article that they go to the hospital is to confirm the pregnancy, and then they go through the rest of their pregnancy without going to like OBGYN. Young children don't typically wear shoes, so you can imagine if your 6 children come into the hospital without their shoes, the amount of germs that they're spreading around this hospital. As you can see, all these children with no shoes.
Yeah, we had a child, they had like a family once there was a baby and their little siblings were walking down the hall without any shoes and socks on. And immediately before I saw them walking down the hallway, I saw the housekeeper taking a bag that had a chest tube and the bag was leaking and that was all down the hallway. And then I turned and these Amish kids were walking down the same hallway with chest tube leakage everywhere. I was like, no, go back to your room. So, there was infection nightmare. All right,
So, do you guys have any questions?
yeah, Nisha.
So when they do the rum springer thing and they decide they want to like stay out in our population, are they like shunned? Or
Yes.
is that just like a? I didn't know if that was just
Yeah.
like a myth or not.
No, it's a thing.
Oh.
So it's a big decision if they want to break the Amish. So,
I just have a question about like, is divorce allowed or like, do you
don't
know?
believe so.
No, okay.
No, I'm pretty sure you're committed, and the women don't necessarily, they have some say in who they get to marry, but
Oh,
again,
okay.
it's
So they're
mostly-
arranged marriages.
It's not,
It's very
arranged,
usually
it's kind of
community.
like,
Oh, okay.
they're like, how about this guy? Okay, or
Okay.
no, so, but no, I didn't read anything about
Oh,
divorce.
okay.
Why don't the kids wear shoes?
So it just comes down, it's like the practice that they have at home. One of the moms explained to me like, oh, they just run around at home, we let them be free. It just like, they're growing so fast, sometimes it's hard to keep up with shoes for them, so they just run around like kids. So, but they don't see it the same way that we do. I see like, chest tube and trail down the hallway, they just see, I'm out with here with my sibling, so.
Any other questions?
I think it's really interesting that you brought up that the men outlive the women, because you know that statistically, women outlive men and have for years,
That's why I
decades,
thought that was interesting when I read it.
generations. And my interpretation of that is the very fact that because they only come to the healthcare system at a late point in illness, things that go undiscovered would be like breast cancer, uterine cancer, because they don't get pap smears, they don't get
All
mammographies.
female related, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
females have a lot of parts. We
And they
need a
don't
lot of
understand that.
maintenance, you know?
They do.
We are high maintenance.
We are high maintenance.
That's why it's so
Birthday.
off, like,
Right,
Yeah.
for the elders to decide their fate because they're men and they're not clinical.
Exactly.
You know, they don't have an idea.
exactly.
And for them to say to a woman, well, this to us is not necessary, that's kind of messed up.
It also comes down to exposure as well. If you think about it, the men are out in the community, they're doing the farming, they're exposed to a lot more pathogens, so they have a chance to build up more of that immunity, whereas the women are typically more at home, so they don't get as exposed to much. So I feel like that might play a factor into it as well.
Mhm.
So, but another journal article I read was about a NICU baby that was an undiagnosed volvulus. When they were like, so the baby was born at home, it was fine, and then he stopped eating, he started projectile vomiting, they brought him to this hospital, and it turns out like his entire the entire intestinal tract was necrotic because of this volvulus, because it was undiagnosed before birth. And the mother was beside herself but couldn't really show it because she had to know that this was God's will. But this was her second child that died, and she felt a little bit at fault. But it was just interesting to see because the dad was just kind of like, okay, this is God's will, what do we have to do?
I just wonder from you saying that, like, I guess because it's their culture, but would they get in trouble for like child neglect in that sense? You know what I
That's a
mean?
great
Like,
question.
I'm just curious because, I mean, is it like forgivable because,
I
they
don't think so,
follow.
because we had kids that like ingested corrosive substances, and I feel like an English person brought their kid in with that, like CPS would be there.
Right, but
And
And
they
they
weren't.
also live on farms too, like you have to keep that in mind.
Right, but an English person, I feel like they
But like,
would.
even if it was like an English person or any other person who wasn't identified with like the Amish culture, lived on a farm and their kid drank that, it's kind of excusable. You have to like look at the other things
Yeah.
too.
It's all
Yeah, I don't know, it's
situational,
kinda
but at the
weird.
same time, it's I guess it's seen a little bit differently because they are so far removed, like gubernatorially than the rest of us. So they're not trying to collect the Social Security check, you know, for their kid. So,
And I don't think their intentions are
mm-mm.
to be harmful against their children.
Yeah,
And this is a perfect example of how it feels to be a nurse in our American healthcare system when you're taking care of patients where your worldviews collide.
mm-hmm.
Okay,
Oh, yeah,
because by our standards, we would think that maybe that was neglect and abuse, but theirs is more of a philosophical approach to illness, etc., and where, you know, it's the will, you know, of the Lord. And so that would be the same thing with if you were caring for a Muslim patient or anything else, you know, so anyone else that's different from us.
Exactly. And it is very glaringly obvious when you do come into contact with them in the hospital. Just the differences like astound me. There's this one mother, she came in, her baby died. She was the baby was like only 1 or 2 weeks old, but the baby died in the hospital. And I came into my shift for that day knowing that this baby had just passed right before I got there. And 10 minutes later, I see the mother who had just given birth wheeling a baby down the hall. She's being pushed in a wheelchair, looking happy, looking joyful. And I'm like, I know darn well that baby in her arms was not alive because that was the culture. They have to bring the baby home so they can start the funeral procession. But it was God's will that this baby was not meant to live, so she showed no emotion. If you looked at her, you would never know that she lost a child that day. So it's just like, as like somebody like in our culture, I was like, you're just wheeling this little dead baby around. Like,
And just as you're explaining that, Kate, we have to be aware of how our body language is, like our facial expressions are, when that woman is wheeling that child out. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it shows, we react, you know, it's like in us, it's way deep in us how we react, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's just been a really interesting experience to talk about some of these populations and how conflicting we can become as nurses, you know. And they have a lot of very unique diseases anyhow because they marry so close in their family line. They, you know, to keep the population close to the outside.
I stepped out for a second, so I don't know if you already said this, but do you know any of the stats on like how many of them leave like permanently after they're on Springer?
I didn't find a specific number. I don't think it's very high.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
Yeah.
not. I mean, that their whole life they'd be giving them.
Yeah,
And their family.
yeah. Fine.
This is kind of like a silly question,
Oh.
but I'm being very serious when I ask it. Have you ever seen the show Breaking Amish?
I've never seen it, but I really kind of want to watch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was like actually similar to what their life was like inside.
I don't think so. Just kind of like when I had to find the picture for this, like the pictures that came up in the Google search made me think that a lot of that was just kind of played up. Like, because the one girl left Amish and became a supermodel. I was like, that seems like a stretch. So,
But who knows? I mean,
yeah.
the only one that could really verify something like that would be some Amish folks watching that show, which would probably be a feat in itself if you could get them to watch.
Because they're not allowed to. It's funny because like
Right.
with our babies, we turn on like lullabies to them on the TV all the time, and
Right.
they're not allowed to touch the TV. But you'll always see a little Amish kid. If the TV's on, they'll just walk by and they'll go.
Right.
And they won't move because they're just so entranced by this thing. They won't touch it, but they'll just stop and stare no matter what's on.
Wait,
So-
so what do you do when you're like in the hospital and the TV's on? Do they Do they just kind of like go like this, or?
No, sometimes they ask us to turn it off. They usually just kind of ignore it. They don't touch it. And they might ask to turn off the light bothering them. That's about it.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.